So that's part of the judicial part also?
No, that's part of the legislative part. That's for you as a planning commission to make, if you think that our ordinance should include more requirements or less, or it should be changed in some form or fashion, based on, again, the general health, welfare, safety of its citizenry, then you pass that recommendation along to the, the county commissioners for their consideration. And if they want to change the rules, if they want to change the law, they have the right to do that. And then the public's right, their due process right, not due process so to speak, but their remedy, if they don't agree with that particular change in our ordinance, is to file a referendum petition and have that matter be voted on subsequently at an election.
So if you're gonna do any adjustment to the rule, you have to have criteria serious enough
Correct.
to hold water.
Right.
And then it would be submissible.
Then it would be constitutional. It would be it would be constitutional.
And part of the fact that we have people come forward today and offer some of that, cannot that be then part of that process?
I'm not really specifically kind of following your question.
Well, I'm just saying, you said if we make any changes or require any other conditions on those rules that have already been made, if we did, we would have to have something to back them up.
Right.
Just cause.
It would have to be some. It would have to be something unique to this particular geographic area and this particular application that justifies what I would think a departure from what the county commission has adopted as the rules here. And I think that you can do that to a certain extent. But again, you're going to be judged on whether the purpose of doing that was arbitrary and capricious and not related to furthering the purposes and intents of our zoning ordinance.
Any other questions for Mark? I think, could you give us those bylaws and maybe just break them down a little, like prior to this hearings, just when it concerns any ex parte or conflict of interest? Maybe so each board member can do their own self-examination
We can work with Mark
and what the options would be, considering, the 2/3 vote, or
we can work with
if
Mark
it
to draft
comes
those,
to that.
and then you'll have to adopt them.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate the service that you do. I mean, you invest a lot of yourselves into this, your time and your talents and your intellect, and I know how hard you try to work to do things the right way, and I want to express my gratitude for that. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Yep. Appreciate it. Okay, at this point, we are at the spot on the agenda where we will have Dakota Range. A conditional use request, it has been brought before us. There are two separate requests, as I understand it. One is for the Dakota Range 3 wind energy system, and the other request is for a transmission line. We have to treat them separately?
Just read.
Okay. Since both issues are related, we will be holding a single public hearing on both requests, but before I turn it over to the staff, can I get a motion to approve the conditional use permit, but we need to
Before you vote, before you ask for a motion.
reseat a different board member. Yes, Mark Luddy has recused himself. And who is sitting on his place?
Don Weber.
Don Weber. Yes, he's here. Yeah. You have to approve their application, right?
Just a motion to
Just a
approve
motion
with their
to-
discussion.
Motion.
Just read
Okay, it says, since both are related, we will be holding a single public hearing on both requests. Can I get a motion to approve the conditional use permit request for the wind energy system? Have a motion and a second.
Who'd you give it to? Tom and then Mike?
It's not on there but do I ask for a motion to approve the other one?
No, we just.
No,
that would-
okay,
you
it's
can
all
only-
together.
You can only handle one motion at a time.
All right.
So now, turn it over to Luke.
All right, Luke.
Certainly, before I go, I just want to point out one more time while I'm speaking, if someone wants to, there is still a sign-in sheet. It was sitting on the Coke machine out in the hallway. If you have not signed, there may be a few sheets floating around. If they are, we'll want those before the hearing starts. But there is a sign-in sheet out in the hallway as well if you did not get a chance to sign in. As we said before, everyone is expected to sign that sign-in sheet, but you only had to mark whether or not you were going to be, only had to X a proponent, opponent, if you were planning on speaking. So, with that, I will start with the staff report. As you noted, Madam Chair, we have a conditional use permit request, actually two of them, by Dakota Range 3 LLC, on certain property in Blooming Valley, Farmington, Mazeppa, and Laura Townships. There are two conditional use permits, as you noted. One is a wind energy system, which is what the motion before you is. There's also a conditional use request for power transmission feeder lines as well. The power transmission lines, for what it's worth, are in that, actually you can see there's a yellow line that goes from the southeast corner up into what I would call kind of the middle there. The blue portion is only in reference to the power transmission lines. The green is with regards to both the wind energy system as well as some of the transmission lines. I do want to point out, is that Mazeppa Township, Todd, that was on the south side of that?
Laura.
Laura is on the south side. Laura Township was noted as being a township that has some of the project there. It was only noted that way because of the fact that the right-of-way on the southern edge is bordered. It's the one side is one township, the other side is Laura Township. So that's why it was referenced that way, just so that each entity was made aware of that. Zoning designation is agricultural. It is also a Zone B Aquifer Protection Overlay District. In portions of it, Dakota Range 3, as we noted, was requesting 151.2 megawatt wind energy system with up to 22 turbines, one substation, up to one operation and maintenance building, and up to two permanent meteorological towers, associated accessory roads, collection lines, and associated facilities. And then also, as noted, an 8 mile, the second permit was for a 8 mile, 345 kilovolt feeder line from the Dakota Range 3 project substation to the Otter Tail Power Switch Yard. And that'd be in the southeast portion of that blue area. Dakota Range 3 has identified approximately 12,000 acres of property and signed up for easements in Grant County project area in the above townships for at least 22 wind turbines. Sorry, for up to 22 wind turbines. with a maximum height of 591 feet. One substation, as I said before, the substation, the O&M building, and the meteorological towers. The project intends to use underground electrical lines that collect electricity from the turbines and feed the electricity to the proposed overhead main transmission line, which runs approximately 8 miles in the county. The application also references the possible need for above-ground collector lines on private property in the event of line loss or an unforeseen underground obstacle. Each turbine will have an access road and will be connected via fiber optic cable to the communications tower. The project will include temporary batch plants during construction, and all activities will meet setbacks for batch plants. We did have information together as far as where the towers are, just with reference to section numbers. You saw a map a few moments ago. This is just that in a chart, or a table to show where those are. I won't spend a ton of time obsessing over where those are, other than that those numbers should match with those. The ordinance and land use plan, Grant County Comprehensive Land Use Plan, does not provide specific guidance on wind energy system. The plan's land use policies and goals do promote the growth of the county's economic base, while at the same time stressing the importance of comprehensive site review. Portions of this project, as noted, are over the Aquifer Protection District, that's Zone B of that district. Wind energy systems are allowable in that district. However, on the condition that the applicant is required to meet requirement that storage of petroleum products in quantities exceeding 100 gallons in one spot, in one tank, or in a series of tanks must be in elevated tanks. Such tanks larger than 1,100 gallons must have secondary containment where it is deemed necessary by the board. The applicant does not intend to discharge industrial processed wastewater on site. Staff in its review compiled and reviewed, annotated where references for the sections of the ordinance. That's section 1211 of the zoning ordinance, where those were found in the application themselves. Again, requirements, as this board is well aware, and frankly a lot of the public is well aware, we've spent some time talking about those requirements, where those are found, discussions, federal, state requirements, site clearance, topsoil protection, compaction, livestock protection, fences, public roads, haul roads, turbine roads, private roads. There are references to all of those, as well as control of dust, soil erosion, and sediment control plan. There was reference to setbacks. Proposed tower locations do meet or exceed the existing setbacks, and despite, as was mentioned a little bit earlier here by the state's attorney, despite not being bound necessarily by them, they do appear to meet the proposed setbacks, at least in the draft sitting today for the Planning Commission, as far as setbacks from residences, property lines, and rights of way. There are references as well as electromagnetic interference, lighting. They'll request alternative means of lighting, including ADLS, but will either way will adhere to the FAA's requirements, whichever that is. References to collector lines, feeder lines, and as well as multiple locations and boundary books, map books, and general descriptions. Bottom line is, as is listed in here, they have agreed to follow the terms and conditions of the zoning ordinance as they are listed. The application and a noise study was submitted. The applicant does state that noise will not exceed 50 decibels, including constructive interference, at the perimeter of the principal and accessory structures of any existing off-site residences, businesses, or buildings owned by a governmental entity. That does comply with the current zoning regulations. 193 of the 209 non-participating receptors, and receptors, for those that don't know, are that's a term for things to measure noise and setbacks from. It's a receptor, plainly stated. 193 of the 209 are less than 40 decibels at those locations. 16 of them, that by my math leaves 16 more. Of those 16 above that, the highest sound level is 42 decibels. Those are non-participating. Of the 154 participating receptors, there are 44, so a little less than a third with a dBA exceeding 40 decibels, but the highest sound level there is 43 decibels. So both of those even below 43, or sorry, below 45 as opposed to 50. As opposed to 45. All participating and non-participating receptors do meet what is listed as tentatively proposed noise standards of 45 decibels. They did submit maps as required by the ordinance, as well as a map of easements. As far as other required information, should be noted that Grant County has permitted 2 other wind energy system sites, and 1 wind energy system is also being considered in addition to Dakota Range 3. There was information submitted with regards to shadow flicker as well. The application provides a shadow flicker analysis which shows that 2 receptors would exceed 30 hours of shadow flicker a year. Those were participating. Those were participating structures, though. There were no non-participating that would exceed 30 hours of shadow flicker. Again, that's not a part of the ordinance at this time. However, it is something that they submitted to be reviewed. With regards to the rest of the zoning ordinance as well, there was information submitted with regards to that. And they are referenced in their general compatibility referenced, and again, as was referenced, I don't know that I need to beat this or point it out. As far as other projects, we have granted other permits in this county for wind energy systems meeting under the rules that we've got today. But there is one that is being considered or has been postponed at this time. The applicant does agree to submit a decommissioning plan and haul road agreements as required by ordinance. They do agree to obtain building permits as necessary, as required. An applicant does agree to meet state and federal requirements regarding the permitting and interference with communications as well. The granting of the permit, just for what it's worth, would not authorize them to break any rules as are in the ordinance. So they would be bound to follow the rules of the ordinance. Motion to approve the wind energy facilities on properties referenced in this application in a manner that meets the terms of the ordinance. As I stated, the specific information provides the board with more detail to make the decision, but final siting is allowed to change if it is done in conformance with the requirements of the ordinance and upon the properties described in the application. The applicant has provided documentation of its ability to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance in reference to the proposed wind energy system. The board, of course, may attach conditions to this request, providing there is some logical reason to do so. Again, I think there was a lot of discussion about that earlier as to what that would be. Staff expects a pretty healthy amount of public comment. Any conditions recommended by staff are primarily just references to continuing obligations from the zoning ordinance and how they've been handled in previously approved permits. A recommendation is that, of course, you already have the one motion in front of you for the wind energy system. Should that be approved, then you would move on to the feeder line system. And if it is approved, though, we'd recommend adding conditions to it that it would become effective upon issuance of the permit by the South Dakota PUC. It would expire on December 17th, 2020 if no substantial construction as described in the application has been completed, or if a state permit from the South Dakota PUC has not been issued, or within 2 years of the final decision regarding any appeal to circuit court relating to the issuance of the permit. The applicant may apply for an extension of this permit if the requirements above can't be met. The conditional use permit is transferable. Other requirements: there would be no discharge of industrial processed wastewater on the site. They agree to follow the requirements of Zone B Aquifer Protection District that I read earlier. The grantor shall provide the zoning office with an updated local contact information of a plant supervisor with the authority to implement any sort of controls, maintenance, etc. Required to meet the requirements of the ordinance. The applicant would agree to meet the requirements of Section 1211 of the Grant County zoning ordinance in reference to remaining obligations, including but not limited to soil erosion and sediment control, haul road agreements, decommissioning plan, final site location, building permit application, in the meeting of federal and state requirements as required by section 1211. The applicant acknowledges the ability of the Board of Adjustment to require some form of financial assurance to cover the anticipated costs of decommissioning the wind energy system. Tentative zoning ordinance amendments propose a financial instrument to be established at $5,000 per tower per year for 30 years. The applicant agrees to construct all wind energy system towers with a setback distance equal to or greater than exhibited in the application. And then lastly, the violations and penalties. Violations of the requirements of the ordinance relating to the operations of a specific tower will result in enforcement and penalties to that specific tower. Violation of the terms of the conditional use permit will be determined by the zoning officer. First violation substantiated by the zoning officer may result in notification letter stating the violation and the prescribed time period to remove the violation. The second violation occurring within 1 calendar year of the previous one may result in a review of the validity of the permit and potential revocation of that permit. The third violation within a calendar year of the initial violation may result in the revocation of that permit within 45 days. The applicant may make appeal of any decision of the zoning officer or other agent of the Grant County Board of Adjustment to the Board of Adjustment. The applicant shall file with the zoning office a notice of the appeal specifying the grounds thereof, and then the zoning officer forwards that on to the board. And then of course any appeal can be taken to circuit court within 30 days of that decision. And lastly, failure to comply with any decision of the zoning officer or other agent of the Grant County would be deemed a separate violation. That's it for me.
Now I will open the public hearing. At this point, we're going to have 10 minutes for the applicant to present before the board, explain the request, stating your name and affiliation with the project before you start, please.
Yeah, you got your stuff. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Dear Planning and Zoning Board, my name is Mark Mauersberger. I'm the Senior Development Manager for Dakota Range 1 and 2. I mentioned Dakota Range 1 and 2 for a historical perspective, and I'll be mentioning it throughout this presentation. But this is a separate entity. It's called Dakota Range 3, and we're submitting this for your consideration. And today we are asking for approval for a form of setback waiver, and of course the two CUPs that Luke mentioned, one for the project footprint and one for the project transmission line. Go to slide 2. Our project owner is NG North America, who's headquartered out of Houston, Texas. As you can see, NG North America has approximately 702 megawatts under construction and over 5 gigawatts in active development in the United States. NG's impressive capabilities are listed here, and we think that they'll be a very good counterparty. Apex, slide 4 please. There you go. Apex is a familiar developer who successfully developed Dakota Range 1 and 2, as I mentioned earlier, in partnership with Grant and Coddington counties. XL will be the buyer of who was the buyer of Dakota Range 1 and 2, will also be buying the power from Dakota Range 3. Slide 6. So this is the layout we have submitted to the South Dakota PUC. Dakota Range 3 includes a project footprint, obviously, as depicted there in the green, plus an 8-mile transmission line depicted in blue. The majority of this transmission line is in Grant County. So a DA, will be hosted by Dakota Range 3. So Dakota Range 3 can access the Otter Tail substation